Welcome to the worst of all possible worlds, the first and only podcast not afraid to discuss that episode of Family Matters when Urkel gets saved. I'm the worst of all possible Brians.
I'm the worst of all possible Joshes.
I'm the worst of all possible AJs. What hell is this?
That's a real episode, by the way. It'll be more important the more we get to know Eugene because it has some parallels, but yeah.
AJ, we are taking
Urkel turns himself over to the Lord.
For like ever or just for an episode?
Of course forever. That's how it works.
I thought Urkel was always... I mean, I never watched Family Matters because I didn't like have a TV growing up, but I always just... That's why I listened to so much Adventures in Odyssey. But wasn't like going to church just a part of Family Matters? Was it or am I like way out in left field?
Yeah. The Winslows are Baptists.
Okay.
Eddie makes that clear.
Yeah.
But Steve Urkel lives in a household where not only are his parents completely ashamed of him, basically don't acknowledge his existence.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But they're like neuroscientists and therefore godless. They don't believe in God at all.
Like Eugene.
Like Eugene.
Yeah. Except that Eugene's parents are dead.
Right.
But it's the same. It's the exact same story. And then there's an episode where they bring Urkel to church, and he's in his very first service, and then he testifies in front of the congregation and gets saved and turns his life over to Christ.
I've definitely seen at least a small part of that episode. I just assumed the whole show was like that.
Hey friends, what are we doing here? What are we talking about today?
Well, we are here to talk about, once again,
Season 1 of Family Matters.
That's right. Adventures in Odyssey.
No, if we're not talking about season 4 of Family Matters, why we should not be talking? I want to talk about Urkel.
We're talking about album. What are these off of, Brian? Album 3, album 4 of Adventures in Odyssey?
Album 1, and then I think it's album 4. The albums don't put everything in chronological order,
Right.
Or in air date order. But this involves the first album, like towards the end of it. We're going back to the episode before the episode where we flashed back to Jenny's death. Mm-hmm. A two-parter with John Avery Whitaker's grandson, Monty Whitaker Dowd.
Relative of Elwood P.
Yeah, somehow he's older than Whit.
Alongside that, we're going to be looking at a two-parter called Connie, which is, of course, about Connie Kendall, who we met last time around, the noted agnostic California teen.
Which is also our introduction to Eugene Meltzner.
Right.
Let's talk about a member of the family, since that one comes before. And I think it's worth exploring Whit and his relationship to his adult daughter.
Yes.
His large adult daughter.
She could not be more adult, this daughter. We can't
distinctly
emphasize
adult.
how much.
Distinctly adult daughter.
Exceptionally large.
She's so adult.
Lady Dimitris.
She think Clifford the Big Red Dog, but for humans.
Clifford the Big Red... Jenny fuck it. Disaster.
Is it Jenna? I actually was very unclear on her name.
Jana.
That was throwing me.
The big red daughter of John Avery Whitaker.
So out of the biological Whitakers, the ones that we know exist, there's John, Jenny, Jana, Jerry, Jason, Jenny, the granddaughter, and then Monty.
Jason.
Right. So, a member of the family. This is a deeply bizarre experience listening to again. I had not really remembered very much of the details of this.
Me neither.
It's wild. And these
old ones just don't have the re-listening value either. They're just not as good, and the incidental music is very grating.
It's
I
terrible.
actually thought that the very top of the episode, the theme that we're brought into, that's not the regular theme song, but like the first theme, it sounded like vamping for a musical. I thought this was going to be a musical episode, which is why you chose it. Is there a musical episode of Odyssey? Do they ever do a full song?
There's one where they go Christmas caroling.
Oh.
I don't think, though, like a full-on musical comedy, I don't think they've ever done.
Well, Adventures in Odyssey, if you're hiring... I'm throwing out my pitch there. Fully sung musical episode where Whit confronts his inner demons. Give me a call.
It's called Naked Boys Singing.
So, this
the
actually
puppetry of the
is the God damn it.
I'm sorry, Josh. No, we're giving you the conch.
Okay, thank you for your support. We're gonna have to cut some of
Conch
this
is my
just
penis.
for
Surprise.
I want to, but then AJ keeps coming up with bangers.
It's great.
Put it in your ear. Put it right up to your
Okay.
ear there. You can hear the ocean.
Your penis?
Yeah, baby!
Right now, we are in a special circumstance. AJ is in the echoey place, a mythical land where everything echoes. He's in New Hampshire right now, opening a Pinter play.
The Granite State.
And so now we are in New Mexico, New Hampshire, and New York. We are representing all 3 new states in the Union. How about that?
Oh,
Whoa,
shit.
holy
Yeah.
shit.
You're
That's
in
awesome.
Nuevo Hampshire, and there are only 3 states that begin with the word new. That's the truth. There is not a 4th.
A Member of the Family Parts 1 and 2 is an episode that fundamentally deals with a few things. The first thing that it deals with is actually Whit's inner demons. And we come to see some of these throughout the course of the episode, and we'll get to it a little bit. The second thing that it covers is how to handle a terrible little shit of a child. And then the third thing that it handles is, of course, corporal punishment. When the episode begins, we are pretty much opening right at the airport. And Whit is there with his good friend, Tom Riley, the almost impossibly...
He's like Jethro Clampett, but dumber and old.
Exactly. And interestingly, as the show goes on, he becomes less that way. But in these early episodes, he is such a hick. Anyway, we're at the airport, and Whit is going to be seeing his grandson Monty for the first time in 3 years.
It's a long time for a kid.
It's a long time for a kid. And Whit's daughter has also divorced her husband. It's sort of implied that the kid is, you know, maybe in a bit of a state as a result of all of this domestic.
It's upheaval.
Monty touches down, and Tom wants to actually pitch this kid on joining the Little League team, which is a team that sucks ass.
The Coyotes.
Monty is not into it.
The
terrible team.
Coyotes in the Midwest? Why would they be the Coyotes? Are there Coyotes in the Midwest? I mean, to be
That's
fair,
actually
I
a really
did
good
see one
point.
in Michigan once, and it was rooting through some trash
That's
cans.
actually something that Charles Lummis, it's really interesting if you read some of his ethnographic stuff from the 1880s, 90s. He collects some
I'm going
Tiwa
to go out and do
coyote
just
stories.
that right now, Brian. I'm going to go out and read his writings from the 1850s. And how are you reading this?
I'm from New Mexico, and it's all public domain, and it's on the internet. You dumb nerd.
Wow.
Wait a second. So, in those books at the end of the 19th century, he actually has to define what a coyote is to his Eastern audience reading that.
That's incredible. It's the California influence in this episode, I think, is incredibly strong.
Yes.
I didn't realize that Whit's family was originally from California, that they originally lived in Pasadena and then moved to Odyssey. I thought he had kind of been born in Odyssey, raised there, and was like a real tree and pillar of the community. But it turns out he came from Pasadena at some indeterminate time ago.
But back to Monty, Whit's grandson.
Real piece of shit.
I have a clip.
Fuck that kid.
Of just the first example you get of Monty and just why he sucks so bad.
Yeah.
Oh, is that all you had with you on the plane?
Yeah, I've got movies in here.
Movies?
You do have a VCR, don't you?
No, Monty, I sure don't.
Oh, well, that's no problem. I guess we can always rent one.
Can always rent
So,
one.
you've become a movie buff, huh?
So he's this worldly, fucking piece of shit kid
Right.
who watches, get this, fucking movies. Not listening to the good wholesome radio.
No, and John Avery Whitaker doesn't have a VCR or cable television, which to Monty is unfathomable.
But you can get those in Odyssey. You can get VCRs and cable if you choose to, but there's so many other cool things to do in Odyssey, like getting on your knees in the back room of Whit's End and giving yourself
Praying
up
to
to
the
prayer.
Lord, praying, yes.
Just
Right,
praying
right.
up to the Lord.
Right.
We'll get to that in the Connie episode where I flipped a table midway through listening to.
Well, I do want to establish something. Odyssey is set in Ohio. Like, it's a little ambiguous, but it's Ohio. They're in Ohio.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And there are a couple episodes that really hint towards it, and I think there's like promotional materials early on that say it's in Ohio. The town has about 30,000 people in it, and the closest big city, like metropolitan area, Connellsville, is only about 30 miles away. So this place is not just some dusty small town.
It's not Podunk backwater kind of Ohio.
Yeah, which it gives the impression, especially in these early ones, that it really is just kind of out in the middle of nowhere, like it's Glorieta, New Mexico or something, but no.
Yeah, it really does feel like its own little bubble.
Yeah.
That's probably why it costs so much money to buy the community center.
Yeah, it just an absurd amount of money.
Let's talk about how much Monty sucks. He's
He
awful.
really sucks.
Yeah, he watches movies.
Right. And the movies presumably are why he sucks so much. It's not that it's not that he watches movies because he sucks. It's that he sucks because he watches the movies. The
Right, 'cause
movies
it's
turn
the
him
80s,
into
the movies are dog shit.
Right.
Never-ending Story, like whatever, Labyrinth.
Oh God.
Right.
Okay.
All of these movies
I happen
are-
to like Labyrinth a lot, but we'll
Yeah,
guess
but
we'll fight
is it
about
good,
that later.
AJ? And does it teach you good values? It does not.
Oh, it does not. No, I see what's happening. Yes, no. The only thing I learned from the Neverending Story is that horses sink.
right.
Yeah, and then when you do that scene with a real horse, it dies. For real.
What?
So Monty's like a real piece of shit.
Yes.
And here's
Yeah,
the
and he keeps cranking it up.
He does.
like he's a real piece of shit, but I think it's a testament to Whit's like utter diabolical character that I was rooting for Monty within about 5 minutes of meeting him.
Yeah.
I wanted him to wreck Whit's fucking life.
Yes. And it's also a testament, I think, to Whit's unique character that the thing that really puts Whit over the edge is not this kid refusing a pizza and eating nothing but brownies instead, doing the thing from the beginning, the musical intro to Black and White by Michael Jackson, where he's like, yo, eat this, like basically doing that. Well, Whit is, of course, on a one-sided phone call. No, it's that Whit on the one-sided phone call learns that he lost a jacket that has $100 in it. That is the thing that puts Whit right the fuck over the edge.
Whit is
Right.
not horrified either that Monty was so irresponsible that he lost that money. He's like frightened of the fact that Monty had access to $100.
Right.
No child should have that kind of power.
And he like assumes Monty stole it, and they could have made it so that Monty stole it, but no, he's like, no, I have a savings account because my mom's a fucking banker and she's teaching me like fiscal responsibility,
Yeah.
and it's my own money. And Whit's like, oh no,
But if he has the money, how can he beat him? I
Right.
mean, then he can just buy a bus ticket to get away. You know.
Yeah.
He has to trap him and make sure
or
he's solely
just see
reliant
a
on him.
fucking movie. But he needs Monty because he always needs low or completely unpaid physical labor.
That's
at Whit's
exactly
end.
right.
What is the business model of Whit's End? Like they have to be like just plummeting in the red.
No way.
It's the flea theater of ice cream shops.
Oh.
It's a training opportunity.
I think the
see.
sense that I get about Whit's End is that the like costs of capital. I mean, again, the whole reason it came about is that Whit was able to acquire the building and the land on it using money that existed within his holding company. So like he is not having to pay fixed costs. The building was paid for in cash. Right. So they're able to just make money off of services, and they sell a
my
fuckload
God,
of soda and ice cream.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, the building's fully paid off. Holy
Right,
shit.
Josh, I'm gonna need you to make a spreadsheet for the finances
I'll build
of
a
all
little-
sorts of different Odyssey
Yes,
endeavors.
build a
and we'll
ledger.
have to adjust for inflation as we go because
Right.
this show is
Yeah.
like 30 years long.
Anyway, setting the sort of
Do you think
financial.
Whit's End survived the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, Whit actually spent a lot of money to get hydroxychloroquine to every house in Odyssey.
Okay, so they're all safe. They're all 100% safe.
Most of it was aquarium cleaner, but still, if you're careful.
So once we see the situation then with Whit taking that one-sided phone call, at that point we start to see angry Whit. Like, and you can hear in his voice, you can hear it's actually a very believable performance. If you've ever seen an angry old man, that's the thing, and it's really, really unsettling.
Yeah.
Whit then, he sleeps on it. Next morning, gets up, says, "All right, you know what? You can sweep the stock room. If you sweep it up, I'll pay you $3. That'll be the money that you can use to go to the movies." Monty says no. He bitches to Whit about it. He bitches to himself about it. He calls his mom to bitch, and then he goes to the register and steals $5 and goes to the movie instead.
Fuck yeah, Monty.
Right, and the register. So I'm gonna play this is a 2-minute long section.
Hell yeah.
But it's actually how this plays out. I'd shorten the transition just a little bit because it was 2 pieces of music going into commercials and coming back out.
Right.
But other than that, I haven't shortened anything. and it does cut right to Whit after administering corporal punishment. I also like this scene because it introduces us to Whit's male employee named Jimmy, who exists in this episode, and that's it. And then he's just gone forever.
That's what I thought. I was like, this isn't a guy. I don't know who is this guy?
Brian.
It's like this weird scene where he's like, who are you? He's like, I'm Jimmy. I work here.
Brian, Jimmy went through the no-no door. That's where all of the one-off characters in Odyssey go. They try and open the no-no door.
Let's hear it.
Are you having some trouble with the cash register there?
Yeah. I can't get it open. Grandpa told me to get $5 out to go to the movies.
Oh, well here, it's real easy. You just press this and this. There you go.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Sure, have a good time.
Have a good time.
He has like a slight twang.
Monty, do you understand why I had to spank you?
Right to it. I was like, whoa!
Come here.
Nobody ever spanked me before. Nobody. And they don't tell me what to do either.
Then I must seem like a pretty mean person to you, don't I?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Let
you're
me tell you a story.
Oh, no.
There was this little boy, see?
Oh,
And for
boy.
his birthday, his folks gave him the cutest puppy you ever saw.
It's just the
He loved to
monologue from
run
The Pillow
and
Man
play.
that Jeff Goldblum does.
Couldn't sit still for a minute. They also gave him a red leather leash for the puppy and told him to be sure and keep the puppy on the leash whenever he took it out for a walk. The boy promised
And they're
he
going to give
would.
me sweets.
Off they went together to
Gotta
the park.
walk
They
that puppy.
ran and played and rolled in the grass and
That's
drank
great.
water out of the fountain.
That's delightful.
Oh, they had a wonderful
This is such a
time.
lovely puppy.
Such
story.
a nice.
The boy
I love a
felt
good puppy
sorry
story.
for the puppy because he was on a leash.
Okay.
Then he began to
This is
think
great.
about it. Wouldn't
Yeah.
it be better to let him run free? He
Oh,
thought.
yeah.
Well, yeah, why not? He's
Why
Then
not?
we wouldn't
It's a
have to
puppy.
worry about getting tangled up in the leash when we
Right.
run.
Yeah.
And I won't have to
Yeah.
keep tugging him back when he heads in a different direction.
Right.
I'll bet that
Right.
collar hurts his neck.
I mean,
So
yeah.
the little boy thought himself right out of
What
his
was that about a
pants to his
collar?
parents. And he let his new puppy run free.
Okay,
Oh, did
good.
that puppy ever have a good time? He ran in circles. He chased his tail. He chased a squirrel up a tree.
Here we go.
He
Here we
scattered
go.
a flock of pigeons.
Here
and
we go.
Then he ran into the street to chase a delivery truck.
What?
Well, it happened so fast the boy couldn't stop him. He heard a
Wait, what?
car honk and
What?
a screech of brakes.
Oh no.
What?
It was all over.
Oh no.
Oh, God.
Well, he didn't make it.
Oh.
Whit kills a dog
So
to be like, this is why I fucking hit you.
Yeah, no.
You stupid
truly,
fucking kid.
That whole monologue, to me, can be summed up like thusly. I'm allowed to hit you because a puppy died once.
right. And then he continues on. This conversation continues on for a little bit.
But he's like, whose fault is it?
Exactly. And it's not the driver, it's not the dog. Well, it must be the kid. So that's why I had to spank you.
Really, in this case, this child sounds very young.
Yeah, it's actually
Yeah.
the parents' fault. It's the
for
parents'
not
fault.
supervising their child.
Right. It's one of those things where you're presented with like a false dichotomy, a false choice, and the real choice just was never mentioned to begin with.
This is like directly James Dobson stuff. This is straight out of Dare to Discipline. Dare to Discipline is less about making the case for corporal punishment specifically than it is for making the case for just disciplining your child at all. And of course, corporal punishment is part of that suite of disciplinary acts that you can carry out against your child. So Dare to Discipline is not making the argument throughout that you have to apply this certain amount of discipline as opposed to this amount. He always weighs everything that he does and recommends against parents who just do the mamby-pamby, Montessori, like let them make their
Right.
own mistakes kind of thing. There is no third option. There is no middle ground.
Right.
He has woven in the idea of corporal punishment with the idea of discipline on its own.
Right. It's the idea that it is not possible to prescribe any sort of parameters for behavior or do any sort of like corrective or advisory action unless you are willing to also exert physical pain.
And so most of the things that James Dobson actually is like arguing for or arguing against make him sound really reasonable because he's like, well, a child's not just going to know it's in their best interest. a child is always going to test the limits because that's what small children do. And it's like, yeah, of course that is.
They're learning.
But he's already just kind of, slipped it in.
Right.
Slipped in that idea of corporal punishment.
The thing that really pisses me off, I think, about this entire exchange, I think the most, I wrote in my notes, this is fucking despicable because it is. But when Whit says, it's not like I derive pleasure from this, and it's so clear that he does.
Oh, he does.
It's so clear that he gets off on this shit.
Yep.
And I feel like that's such an underlying thing with a lot of like spanking stories or a lot of corporal punishment stories, is that it's like, ugh, I really don't want to do this, but you're making me do this. I'm like, no, you're doing this to make yourself feel better.
And
this
honestly,
is not for the child.
Yes, and to that point, I think that in part 2, which we're going to get to in a moment, that much is pretty much explicitly stated, that at least from his daughter's perspective, he got off on it.
Yeah. So I have this little clip from the end of the spanking scene that just, it's very threatening.
Now, if you make me, I'll yank on your leash again. As hard and as often as I have to, if that's what it takes.
Oh, God.
Jesus.
If you can learn to trust me and be honest with me, I guarantee that we can have a real good time this summer.
And
horrible.
Hal Smith
Horrible.
really can't even sell that. Even as gentle and folksy as he can make his read. That it just makes it more
It's awful.
terrifying.
Yeah, it will,
because
right.
what advocates for the idea of corporal punishment will often do is they'll separate it from physical abuse, where someone just hits their kid without reason or just hits their kid because they're angry, right? Because the idea of corporal punishment that they push forth is that you don't do it while you're angry. You do it as a regimented thing, right? You set up the reason, you dish out the punishment, and then you make it clear why you did it. Why that doesn't work is because it's still an act of physical violence on a child. And a child doesn't really give a shit about reasoning, which is something James Dobson acknowledges, right? A child's reasoning is not really at play here, which is why the mamby-pamby stuff doesn't really work very well either if a child is misbehaving.
And also, like, from a purely logical perspective, if you think about it, given the framework, there's no reason that the sort of corrective action needs to be an act of physical pain. Like, if the point is the framing, why do you have to hit the kid? That doesn't track with the internal logic of the arg. It doesn't make sense.
Well, and the child is not going to associate that action with getting the pain, right? This is well documented psychological stuff. Yeah. This is stuff Dr. Spock was talking about like half a century ago. The child associates the parent with the dishing out of that pain. If the pain is not something that they receive as a consequence for the direct action, right, where it's like, I jumped off of this brick wall and then I, broke my ankle. Right, they're not going to jump off a brick wall.
If I touch the burner on the stove, that's why you don't touch the burner on the stove. It's fucking hot.
But my parent saw me almost touch the burner and then slap me on the wrist. I'm just going to think, okay, don't let my parent see the next time I do it.
Right.
So kids become far less trustworthy of their parents. They end up, if their parent is not immediately around, their behavior does not adjust in any way. It does, at least positively. And it does incline them towards violence more. And it also, like if a kid feels like they've been wronged by another kid, it makes them think, well, the way to correct that is through violence.
Yeah, I mean they call it the cycle of abuse for a reason.
Yeah. I wrote down at the end of this episode, I just need someone to read Whit for filth, and I know that it's never going to happen. And then
it kind of did happen.
to my absolute surprise, it kind of did, because we see the ramifications of that cycle of violence.
Yeah,
but there is a very large asterisk but at the end of it.
This is the interesting thing, because like ideologically, the episode is on Whit's side, right? It's that he's a person who makes mistakes, but he's correct here.
Yeah.
Yes. But Paul McCusker is a very strong writer, and he knows how to write with like characters and their histories and motivations. He's the strongest writer for the whole series.
I really agree. This second episode was really quite good. I think it's the first good one I've listened to.
So Josh, do you want to run us
Why don't we?
This?
Let's kind of pivot over to that. So just to wrap up part one, once Whit, tells Monty that he'll yank on your leash hard and often. This actually,
yikes!
Yeah, I know. This actually shapes Monty up like literally fucking immediately.
Yeah. We cut to them a week later, and he is a perfect angel, and he's on the baseball team.
And not only is he on the
sucks.
baseball team, his skills in center field have somehow managed to win them the title.
Yeah. Despite the best efforts of Heather Bullock and her just being the absolute biggest loser in the history of the Coyotes. Yeah, Heather, I'm coming after you. Your dad worked for Halliburton. Fuck you, Heather.
Just insane shit. So
I think Tom says she's the best little loser he's ever seen.
Which, you know what? When he said that, I kind of pictured her just standing like a little off camera with a single balloon that slowly deflates as a single tear rolls down her face. I'm like, yeah, you deserve it. Your dad is a war criminal, Heather.
So,
wow. Okay, Mr. Altman. I didn't realize you were on the podcast.
when we so during this celebration, which again, it should be noted, Whit's making a cake and everything. There's a dumb thing where he needs to change it from saying Coyotes because it's a J. It looks like a J because there wasn't enough frosting. Terrible bit.
Josh, I'm going to disagree with you. I think the cake not saying this side up was a moderately okay joke, and I chuckled.
So in comes Jana Whitaker, daughter of John.
Daughter of John Avery Whitaker, and she's showing up because earlier on, Monty had called her over long distance.
Wait,
and
Josh?
Yes.
What did Monty do?
Monty had called her on the phone.
He what?
Yes. And
it's so good.
He what? So earlier on, Monty had called his mom and over long distance told her that Whit had taken the money. That was, he hadn't lost it. He hadn't lost his $100. Yeah. Whit had taken his money away from him and had forced him to work as an indentured servant at Whit's End. So it was still like 30% true, but it wasn't like true. And so mom shows up then because she thinks that her dad is abusing her son. And
correctly.
And then Monty says, probably the only like believable line in the whole thing in terms of like the things that kids say, which is like they're going back and forth and she's like, I love you. And he's like, but Grandpa loves me more, which is like completely believable. And then Monty goes and says,
because that's just how much the spanking fixed.
Right. And then Monty goes over to Whit and says, I think you need to spank me again because my mom is mad. And then Jana confronts Whit and is like, what have you done to my son? And then that's sort of the cut. And then we begin part 2 where Whit and Jana are just going at it.
Why did she sound like Count Chocula?
I don't know. Why not? And so,
what have you done to my son?
To my baby boy?
Hey, I would just like to take this opportunity to say that I auditioned for Count Chocula recently, and I did not get it.
Bummer.
And it has absolutely devastated me. So thank you, Brian.
You, General Mills.
Yeah, we're coming after
or
you.
Post, or whichever one you are.
Creators of Frankenberry.
We're going to cancel that cereal company.
First, you put the shrimp in the cinnamon toast crunch at your plant in Albuquerque.
That's a real thing that you actually did.
That is a real thing you did.
Totally real. Totally
you
100%.
upset Topanga, and you have to live with that for the rest of your days.
So
when I read about what the Cinnamon Toast Crunch guy had done in his career, I said,
he what?
Can we actually have that anytime anybody gets canceled? Like we have a new sex scandal and we just have that play behind it?
Ideally. Okay. So Jana and Whit immediately get into it, and I don't honestly, to me these episodes felt like they were written by two different people.
Yeah, like polar opposites.
So I have this first Jana Whit conversation.
You hit Monty?
I didn't hit him. I spanked him. There's a big difference.
Well, not to me. You know how I feel about that kind of thing.
Well, you and your brothers didn't come out any the worse for wear.
Is that what you think?
Now, listen to me. Don't you see? He was testing me, testing his limits. All I did was make sure his question got answered.
And that was your answer.
Yes, it was.
Oh, man, I like the
gritted teeth.
That's
growling.
So
it's a
scary.
very like real, grounded. The dynamics of the situation are grounded and believable. The performance that Hal Smith gives there is like it feels like he's holding so much back, and it is coming from a place that is organic to who his character is. Like, there is extreme dysfunction in this relationship that goes all the fucking way back. And I think that's telegraphed so well in that scene.
They have a terrible relationship. It's not that she sucks and he was good. This is a bad relationship that broke a long time ago, and you can tell from this moment. This allows the conversation not to have a winner. Sort of like the conversation with Robert Altman in the Vietnam episode.
Right.
While there's still like a clear ideological perspective that supports one character over the other.
Yeah, and I would just like to say that I know I've been ragging on Whit a lot, but I don't want that to be confused with the actor playing Whit. I actually think he is doing an excellent job, and I think I reacted so viscerally to this episode, and especially that line where he says, you know, through gritted teeth, that I don't know, I know this guy. I've met this guy before. I've seen this guy get this mad, and it was very, very realistic.
And so this conversation continues.
I've just had it with you passing judgment on me. Nothing I do pleases you. You criticized my friends, my work, my hobbies, my marriage. Let's not forget my marriage. You had plenty to say about that. And then you criticized me for getting a divorce. And now it's my son. Did you hear that, Dad? My son. Let's try to keep that straight, shall we?
So what she's articulating, I mean, he made it clear, like, Monty's issue is that he has no structure in his life, right? Everything's been upended by his parents' divorce. You haven't met his sister yet. I don't know if we'll play any more of these Jana episodes, but she's like perfect, and Monty is the fuck up. And so he's like clearly at this point, this transitional point where nothing makes sense anymore, and he doesn't have any grounding. And it's also pretty clear from this conversation here that Jana similarly did not have any grounding when she was young. And these are the result of what's going on with their parents, right?
Yeah. Right.
And so it's the result of what happened with Whit and with Jenny. And she felt by the wayside, and she couldn't ever find any way not to just be constantly criticized by her father.
Right.
Didn't even like her high school friends, and that's clearly stuck with her because even her boyfriend, then husband, no, he couldn't have any of that. Then they got divorced, and well, that's just not a Christian thing to do, right? What are you going to do to your kids? Well, you didn't like the guy. You thought he was bad in the first place, right?
And you wouldn't stop criticizing
There's
me
no way
about
to
it.
do right.
I think
there's no way to win.
I think it's really, it was a really ballsy choice to write this in this way, because what I was expecting to happen was that, you know, Jana would be portrayed, as happens in many of the other episodes of Adventures in Odyssey, the woman would be portrayed as just being like really like hysterical and irrational. But honestly, in these fights, Whit is the one who's irrational. Aggressively so.
And Tom calls it out too.
Yes, and he's still in denial of the irrationality that he carries around with him because he's unwilling to swallow his pride and admit that actually in the way that he raised these kids, he actually might not have done it all correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that this still gives him an out. Maybe it's just because I want to be uncharitable to the writers of this show. I think this gives him an out because his sin is not, at this point, we find out a little bit more later, but at this point it's not neglect. It's not that he's adversarial. It's that he's judgmental. And of course, what we know of Whit at this point is that he passes judgment on a lot of things because he's correct.
Right.
Yes.
And so, in
100%.
part, she's doing things wrong. She's not a bad person, but she's doing things wrong. And he has told her that she does things wrong, which still kind of allows him to get a little bit less of the blame from that.
Well, I also think that this episode really drops the ball in the last few moments.
I agree.
Whit's apology isn't an apology.
Yeah.
And she kind of accepts it as one. It reminds me of On Golden Pond a lot, which is a play that I absolutely fucking despise, and a movie I absolutely fucking despise, because it's the moral of that isn't you should strive to be a better person and make amends for the wrongs you are. It's just, no, you can be old and racist and treat your children like shit, and they just kind of have to put up with it and apologize to you because you're old. And that moral is basically how this episode ends.
I don't want to get to the ending quite yet, but I think you're exactly right, AJ, that like it really, this is an episode that I think is the first one of the ones we've listened to, at least, that like has actual dramatic craft to it, and then it raises the stakes, and seems to be going somewhere, and then it just kind of drops the ball. So to go through a little bit more of what happens then, you know, I think we've talked a bit about the dynamics of what these fights look like. They're very, like we said, very believable. Whit has a conversation with Tom Riley, and he says, you know, I really don't know what's going on with Jana. She's unpredictable in a dangerous sort of way. And Tom immediately shit checks him on that. He's like,
yeah,
like, really? Yeah. Really, dude? Like, she's the problem? And Whit still can't figure out why it is that she is so mad at him. And I wrote down, well, I don't know, maybe she's mad at you because you beat the shit out of her when she was a kid, and now you are apparently meddling in her relationship with her own son, at least from her perspective. Just a thought.
But it's a very smart use of Tom, though, I will say. Like, credit to the writers here. That is actually a brilliant use because, you know, as you said, he's sort of a hayseed. Yeah. But you get the sense. What I love about this episode, in a way that a lot of the other episodes don't actually, that I've listened to so far, haven't quite lived up to, is it hints at a whole world in Odyssey that we are never going to see. That Tom might not be the sharpest tool in the shed, but goddamn, he sees everything. Like, he sees everything. And
you'll see as Tom develops as a character, he does become more of the wise hick than just the silly hick.
Right. But I mean, I don't even need him to be wise. I just need him to like be able to see things as they are. Which he's able to do so, I think, beautifully in that scene with him and Whit.
And Tom also actually has a lot of history.
I mean,
I'd
assume it's 30 years. I mean, this is like Simpsons level. Like, I'd say Odyssey and Springfield probably have equal amounts of lore to them. Am I wrong about that?
No, honestly.
No, you're not wrong. That's exactly it. It's this is evangelical Simpsons.
I just did the Lisa face. That's the meme online of just staring into the abyss. That's the face I just made.
Jen and Whit come back to talk to each other again, and this time it is at Whit's house because Jen is like, "Look, I got to take my kid home," and they start fighting again. And once again, this scene, the dynamics, it's exactly how fights really are. It's just hitting the exact same like points of grievance over and over again in slightly different ways, because that's what it is. It's like you're fighting to try to score points, and you can never score
they've
points.
Done this for like 20 years now,
and they already know how to finish each other's sentences and get in the points, just the little needles that they know are going to hurt each other. And then Janet's like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to go up and take him, and he's not there. They go then to the sheriff's office, the police station.
No, the sheriff's house where the sheriff lives.
The sheriff's house,
the deputy's clinic.
And once they get there, they learn that Monty ran out, and when he ran out, he actually broke some windows at Whit's End, did some property damage.
I'm so worried about Monty.
And there's a wonderful moment here too that I just loved, just from one of those wonderful terrible moments in writing where Whit goes, "Hi, Fred, that's the sheriff." It's literally the police. That's who you are. So good.
It is literally that. I will say, credits due, I actually really like the voice actor who did Fred. I thought he was very understated. Yeah. I did miss Inspector Gumshoe though, from before.
Detective Harley, who is now gone. Right. They've killed him. He's dead in the ground.
But Harlow Doyle. Well, he went through like the no phaser. He was like, he got transmogrified. Exactly.
Except that the transmogrifier is also something from Adventures in the Odyssey, is used exactly in one episode and never heard from again. Even though Whit got the idea for the transmogrifier from a literal angel.
What?
Okay.
Anyway.
What? Okay. So we can't go into that yet. We absolutely can't go into that.
I know. I just like setting a few things up for AJ.
I didn't remember that point
angels
either.
Are real?
Angels are real and they're cool.
Haven't you read the Bible?
Yeah, angels are real and are cool and they are my friend.
But are they human or are they like the thousand
No, they're
like
angels.
actual angels in the Bible?
They're angels.
Yeah, well, like angels in the Bible with like the million eyes and like the thousand gaping maws mouths and the little tiny wings.
Well, Whit does do some gaping. We already
That's right.
established
Big
that.
old buzz slut. So at this point,
behind the imagination station is just a box full of poppers.
I thought he was a big sounding guy. I thought he just really loved.
No, that's Tom.
Yeah, that tracks.
Yeah.
So at this point, now that Monty has like actually gone out and done at least a couple $100 worth of actual property damage,
which at the rates Whit pays will take
a lifetime,
30 years to pay off. Yeah.
At this point, the question does finally arise: is Jana going to dare to discipline? She goes up to him first and talks to him. Whit's not there yet. Monty eventually spills the beans. The whole reason he did the thing was he was upset because Mom and Grandpa were fighting. And also he's pretty salty at his own mom because she has been not there for him in the way that she needs to be, has been bringing a lot of guys around. It's just like not a responsible situation. And
I mean, I do think that there's something interesting in the way that Monty brings up her boyfriends, that the episode itself is actually not judgmental of.
No.
Like, the show takes a really interesting stance towards divorce, where it's like, it's of course something you don't want to do. The family portraits, at some point we'll get to the pilot episodes. They have a couple of really like divorce is just the worst tragedy ever kind of things.
Right.
But it's not judgmental of characters who are divorced, and Jana is far from the first or the last to be on that show. Right, Connie's mom is also divorced.
Yeah, we learned that in the next two episodes.
Yeah, so Whit shows up and stands up for his daughter against his shitty grandson.
Fuck that kid, man.
Showdown.
The fucking 10-year-old in 1987 whose name is Monty.
Well, his first name is C, and his last name is Burns.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Excellent. Yes.
And then she says thank you, and he says, "Oh, what for? I was just meddling again, right?" Like, just has to get in that little needle again, which is again fucking. Prick. It's real though. It's real. Yeah. I think that the way that particular thing like was voiced, it felt a little bit too reconciliatory to be real, but whatever. And then we get this monologue.
This monologue is word salad, by the way. Go ahead, Josh.
Oh yeah, there's a reason I didn't get the clip of it.
Yeah, it's way too long.
And it's hard to navigate. He pivots like 3 times. Anyway, go ahead, Josh.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to say. I actually thought that this monologue worked pretty well for what it was, because yes, it's word salad. Yes, it's extremely disorganized, but in that moment, so is Whit. He has not in any meaningful way come to terms with what actually happened. He has clearly never opened up to his daughter about it. And honestly, it sounds like he hasn't really opened up to anybody about it in a meaningful way. He still has all of these conflicting, frustrated feelings, and he bounces around from talking about how, he wanted to move to Odyssey so that, his kid could have an idyllic life before he maybe potentially would get drafted. But also, if he did get drafted, then, that would be a thing. And also, just all of these different conflicting priorities and desires and feelings, and he just kind of
all of this came out of Jerry dying in Vietnam. Right. It's sort of this like ordinary people thing. Yeah. Where Whit is Mary Tyler Moore.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yep.
And I thought
think about that.
Yeah, it really I forgot just how much the older episodes use Jerry as a device. I don't mean that to denigrate the device. But like his death constantly comes up as something that really like fundamentally fractured Whit and his family.
Yeah, I mean the ordinary people comparison is extraordinarily apt. Like that's the thing that nobody can get over. I do think that to go to the point of like, how much are the characters given leeway to like, or how much does the show make excuses for characters or put its finger on the scale? I do think that the writing uses the loss of Jerry and the subsequent loss of Jenny as a little bit too much of a like, the only reason that things are this way is because of these inciting incidents, as opposed to how things usually work, which is where these kinds of incidents accelerate things that have sort of already been happening in some way. But even so, I found that monologue to be, was it perfect? No, but for what it was, it worked for me.
The one place for me where it chickens out is where he says, I didn't show favorites. It wasn't that you weren't my favorite and that Jason was, or something like that. But like, that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, that's exactly
favorites.
what
He gave Jason all the attention because he was just like, this kid's going to get drafted in a couple years and then he's going to die.
That's him lying to himself in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, true. And the other thing was that Jana got into anti-war stuff.
And we already know how Whit feels about anti-war activism.
But it was interesting that when he talked about it here, it was gentler about the anti-war stuff. Like he was just, it almost seemed as though Whit understood why she did it.
Right.
Which is something we really don't see in the anti-Vietnam episode.
Yeah.
But see very prominently
with
here.
the kid whose dad died on a day where no American soldiers died.
Yeah. When he was eaten by the zombie horde that had overtaken Saigon. Yes, of course, as we all know.
And Jana says, which I think is an incredibly like honest line, she's like, I thought you just didn't like girls.
Which is brutal and kind of beautiful.
It's also very in character for who Whit is. Like,
and you have to understand, guys, that I have been waiting so many episodes for someone just to drag Whit through the fucking mud. So this was Christmas for me.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll get to the actual Christmas episode a little bit later, but this was my Christmas.
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll talk about them, but I could send you the other Jana episodes because they never actually get along. Eventually, they just kind of get rid of her on the show. She doesn't appear after the first couple seasons, but they are always just constantly arguing with each other no matter what.
Which is a real dynamic in a lot of families, and I think that's very
no
important.
matter how many times they apologize, no matter the fact that he has now hugged her for the first time since she was 12 years old.
There's the line she has that we played a little bit earlier.
Well, you and your brothers didn't come out any the worse for wear.
Is that what you think?
And I had this very visceral flash of her having conversations with her siblings, or like comforting them after they've been beaten by Whit. And like actually seeing the ramifications of this, quite frankly, very dangerous man. No more so than for the cult he's starting, which we can talk about with fucking Connie, his greatest disciple. Holy shit, these episodes.
Before we get there, though, let's wrap this one up. They get that real hug. Jana then, of course, does dare to discipline. She does not through corporal punishment, but by setting boundaries. And
indentured servitude.
It ties a bow on it a little bit too neatly, I think. Because also, this is something where, in real life, it couldn't be wrapped up. It would always be messy. But they had to figure out a way to, like, conclude it so they could go to Chris. And Chris would be like, there's a lot of things that are difficult sometimes, but God helps.
I like that. Your Chris sounds like Jim Baker's wife. Wow, that's good.
When my Chris is Sonic the Hedgehog, unfortunately. Sometimes things in life can be a little complicated, but that's okay because you have God on your side. Gotta come fast. Oh my God, did I say gotta come fast?
You said gotta come
fast.
You
did.
Oh God, I meant to say that on purpose.
Now I'm just imagining some sort of like Sonic by way of VeggieTales, which is what should have happened from the very beginning.
It's time for silly songs with Knuckles.
We are the pirates who don't do anything.
This episode, to me, feels like the first time where rather than just being like a cutesy, largely based on like this thing happens, and then this thing happens, and this thing happens, this is a character-driven episode in a way that I don't think we've really seen yet at this point.
This has an arc. Everything connects. It has difficult conversations in it where people don't win.
And in part two, at least, I think it does a reasonably effective job. Now let's talk about a character-centric episode that is not well written.
Right after this break.
This week's episode of Whit's Endless Summer is brought to you by...
Now we know that the Bible is the true word of God, and because of that, there aren't any mistakes in it. And yet, we still have two almost
If anybody finds this tape, my name is Jimmy. My name is Jimmy. Ain't that the darndest thing? I can't remember my... Why can't I? I've been wandering the hallways for a few days now. I think there's some kind of labyrinth under Whit's End. Time seems different down here. My dad's old wristwatch stopped a few hours ago, and that battery was supposed to last 30 years. So, that's not good. I tried to make my way back to the no-no door, but I keep losing my sense of direction. And I think the walls may be shifting. I feel something may be following me. I keep looking over my shoulder, and there's never anything there. Whatever it is, it must breathe when I breathe, and blink when I blink. I can hear its wet mouth smacking. But that's okay. I got God on my side. And as Mr. Whitaker always says, with God's protection, there's nothing for you to... What was that? Oh. Oh my gosh, it's you. Ain't you a beautiful sight? Are you lonesome, friend? You look mighty lonesome. Come here and get a nice big hug from your friend Jimmy.
Beans. If you're going to eat something, eat some fucking beans, I guess. I don't know.
This has been a preview of our premium episode, Whit's Endless Summer Part 2, Urkel Gets Saved. If you want to listen to the whole thing, check out our Patreon, where you can listen to the entire episode, where we talk about 3 more episodes of Adventures in Odyssey. As always, we are presented to you by our sponsors, not Beans, but our patrons on Patreon. Like Octavia Immersive, Dominic Russo, Nate Netzley, Ben Ferber, Aeneas Hemphill, Benjamin R. Alford, with a special thank you to Nikola Donov and Ashley Stoneman. Have a good day.